The crystal screen shattered across the marble floor, and for a moment, the entire ballroom fell silent. I watched Yuna's smug smile freeze as Jae-wook stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mississippi Park," he said, extending his phone toward me. "Please, use mine. Consider it yours now." What happened next? Let's just say some people learned the hard way that breaking the wrong person's phone can cost you everything. My name is Park Ji-yoon, and I should have known that accepting an invitation to the annual Kim Group charity gala would come with complications. As I walked through the gleaming entrance of the Shilla Hotel ballroom, my simple black dress felt appropriate until I saw the sea of designer gowns that probably cost more than my annual salary combined. I'm a software engineer at a mid-tier tech company, but my work on AI security protocols had caught some serious attention in Seoul's business circles. 3 major financial institutions had adopted my frameworks in the past year, and apparently, that was enough to earn me a spot among Korea's corporate elite for one evening. The ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the Han River. Waiters in pristine white uniforms glided between guests carrying champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. The air hummed with the kind of conversations where million-won deals were discussed as casually as weekend plans. "Oh my God, who let the office workers in?" The voice cut through the elegant atmosphere like nails on a chalkboard. I turned to see a woman about my age, draped in what I immediately recognized as a custom Chanel gown, the kind that required 3 fittings and cost more than most people's cars. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo that probably took 3 hours to achieve, and her jewelry caught the light with every calculated movement. Her friends clustered around her like satellites orbiting a particularly venomous star. Each one was perfectly groomed, perfectly dressed, and perfectly vapid from what I could overhear of their conversation about which designer was so last season. "I'm Lee Yuna," she announced, as if her name should trigger immediate recognition and genuflection. "My father owns 3 of the largest construction companies in Seoul, and my family has been in business with the Chaebol for 4 generations. And you are?" She looked me up and down with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for livestock at auction. I could practically see her mental calculator tallying up the cost of my outfit, my dress from a department store, my shoes that were comfortable rather than designer, my simple jewelry that had sentimental rather than monetary value. "Park Ji-yoon," I replied evenly, extending my hand with a genuine smile. She looked at it like I'd offered her a dead rat. "The little tech girl, Yuna's smile was razor thin and twice as cutting. "I heard about you. Someone mentioned you're here because you fixed some computers or something? How quaint." Her friends tittered behind their champagne glasses like a chorus of hyenas. One of them, a platinum blonde with lips so inflated they looked like they might pop, leaned forward conspiratorially. "Is it true you actually work for a living?" she asked with wide-eyed fascination, as if I were some exotic specimen in a zoo. "Like, with your hands and everything?" "I developed a comprehensive security framework that prevents corporate espionage and cyber attacks," I corrected calmly, my voice steady despite the growing irritation. "It's currently protecting about 60% of Seoul's major financial institutions from threats that could cost billions in damages." The explanation sailed right over their perfectly coiffed heads. "How technical," Yuna said with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand. "I'm sure that's very important to people who work." She pronounced work like it was a communicable disease. "Personally, I find that kind of thing so beneath me. Why strain yourself with all those numbers and computers when you can simply marry well and let someone else handle the tedious details?" The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to remind me exactly where I stood in this room's carefully constructed hierarchy. But instead of the shame she clearly expected, I felt something else entirely, a cold, calculating anger that sharpened my focus like a blade. I smiled, filing away every word, every sneer, every casual cruelty for later use. "It must be exhausting," I said thoughtfully, "putting so much effort into your appearance. The daily maintenance alone must be a full-time job." Her perfectly contoured face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me?" "Oh, nothing offensive," I said, taking a deliberate sip of champagne and savoring both the bubbles and her growing discomfort. "I was just admiring how much time and money you invest in your presentation. It's very dedicated. Very committed to the cause." The barb hit its mark. Yuna's smile became strained around the edges, and I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes before she reasserted her mask of superiority. Before she could formulate a response, the lights dimmed slightly, and I heard a murmur ripple through the crowd like a wave. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned, and the very air seemed to shift with anticipation. Kim Jae-wook, the CEO of Kim Group, had entered the ballroom. Even from across the room, he commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with his wealth or position and everything to do with pure presence. Tall and lean, impeccably dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, he moved through the crowd with the kind of confidence that comes from genuine achievement rather than inherited privilege. I'd seen him in business magazines and news interviews, but in person, there was something else, an intelligence in his dark eyes that seemed to catalog and analyze everything around him. When he spoke to people, he gave them his complete attention, as if their words were the most important thing in the world at that moment. Now that, Yuna purred, her voice dropping to a husky whisper, is a real man. The kind of man who understands quality when he sees it. Her eyes fixed on me with obvious meaning. Not that someone like you would have a chance, of course. I watched as Jae-wook made his way through the crowd, stopping to speak with various guests. His interactions were brief but focused, and I noticed something interesting. He seemed genuinely engaged with people based on what they said, not what they wore or who their fathers were. I heard he's single again, one of Yuna's friends whispered conspiratorially. The last girlfriend couldn't handle the pressure of dating someone so important. She was some actress, I think, pretty enough, but no class. No understanding of how our world works. Please, Yuna scoffed, tossing her hair with practiced elegance. He needs someone who understands his world. Someone with breeding, with connections, with the right family background. Someone who belongs in these circles by right, not by accident. Her eyes fixed on me again with laser precision. Someone who doesn't have to pretend to fit in. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been watching Jae-wook too. But not with the romantic calculation they assumed. I'd been studying his pattern, his preferences, his values as expressed through his business decisions and public statements. And something told me this evening was about to become very, very interesting. The game was just beginning, and they had no idea what they were playing with. The evening's formal program began with the usual speeches about corporate responsibility and giving back to the community. I found myself genuinely interested in Kim Group's new education initiative, a comprehensive program designed to provide coding boot camps and technical training in underserved communities throughout Seoul. The speaker, a vice president whose passion for the project was evident in every word, explained how they planned to partner with local schools to integrate practical skills training with traditional curriculum. It was ambitious, thoughtful, and exactly the kind of systemic thinking that could create real change. How terribly noble, Yuna's voice dripped with sarcasm as she materialized beside me during the applause, like a perfectly dressed vulture. Teaching poor people to use computers. Very charitable of them. I'm sure all those little children will be so grateful to learn how to. What is it you do again? Push buttons? Education is the most effective tool for economic mobility, I replied without looking at her, keeping my attention focused on the stage. Though I suppose that concept might be foreign to someone who inherited their position in life without having to earn it. The temperature around us dropped several degrees. Champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand. Inherited? Her voice was dangerously quiet. Darling, I earned my place here through connections, breeding, and understanding how the world really works. Some of us don't need to code our way into relevance. Some of us are born relevant. And some of us don't need daddy's money to feel important, I said sweetly, finally turning to meet her gaze with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. The barb hit its mark like an arrow finding its target. Yuna's carefully applied makeup couldn't quite hide the flush of rage that colored her cheekbones. You know what your problem is, she hissed, stepping closer so her voice wouldn't carry to the other guests. You think intelligence matters in this world. You think because you can make computers do little tricks, you belong here among your betters. But you don't. You'll always be just a worker bee, serving your function, and we'll always be the ones who own the hive. Interesting metaphor, I mused, tilting my head as if considering her words seriously. Though I think you're fundamentally confused about who the queen bee actually is in this scenario. Before she could formulate a response to that, there was another shift in the room's energy. The speeches had concluded, and Jae-wook had begun mingling more seriously with the guests. His path through the room seemed casual, but I noticed he was making a point to speak with people from different sectors, not just the usual suspects who monopolized his attention at these events. Watch and learn, Yuna whispered, her anger transforming into predatory focus as she smoothed her dress and affected a demure smile. This is how real women operate. This is how you capture the attention of someone who actually matters. I had to admit, her transformation was genuinely impressive. The vicious socialite melted away like ice in the sun, replaced by a poised, elegant woman who looked like she'd stepped directly off the cover of a luxury magazine. Her posture became graceful, her expression serene, and her smile radiated the kind of refined charm that probably took years to perfect. When Jae-wook's path finally brought him within range of our small group, she was ready. Mr. Kim, she breathed, offering a perfect bow that managed to be respectful without being servile. What an incredible honor to finally meet you. I'm Lee Yuna, perhaps you know my father, Lee Chen of Chongmin Construction? Of course, Jae-wook replied with practiced politeness, though I noticed his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Your father's company did excellent work on our Busan facility. Very professional operation. Yuna preened under his attention like a cat in a sunbeam. I'd love to discuss some ideas I have about potential collaborations between our companies. Perhaps we could continue this conversation over dinner sometime? I know a wonderful place in Gangnam that serves the most exquisite Hanwoo beef. I watched the interaction with growing fascination. Jae-wook was perfectly courteous, responding to her overtures with the kind of diplomatic grace that successful CEOs master early in their careers. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of professional distance that suggested he'd had this exact conversation approximately 1,000 times before with 1,000 different variations of the same person. I appreciate your interest in working with Kim Group, he said diplomatically, his tone warm but non-committal. Our partnerships team handles most collaborative discussions. I'll be sure to let them know you're interested in exploring possibilities. It was a polite brush-off, delivered so smoothly and professionally that Yuna almost missed it. Almost. Her smile flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression of confusion and wounded pride, before reasserting itself with renewed intensity. Of course, I completely understand how busy you must be, she said, her voice taking on a slightly desperate edge despite her efforts to maintain composure. Running such a large organization must be incredibly demanding. Perhaps we could discuss it at a more casual setting? I'm hosting a small gathering next weekend at my family's estate in Pyeongchang-dong. Very intimate, very exclusive. Just a few close friends who really understand the pressures of our world. Actually, Jae-wook said, and I felt the shift in his attention like a physical force, I don't believe we've been introduced. His gaze had moved from Yuna to me, and suddenly every person in our immediate vicinity was listening with the intensity of spectators at a tennis match. The temperature around us dropped to Arctic levels. Yuna's face went through several micro-expressions, surprise, confusion, and then dawning horror, before settling on barely contained fury. This is Park Ji-yoon, she said through gritted teeth that were still arranged in the approximation of a smile. She's in computers. The dismissal was so obvious, so deliberately diminishing, that several nearby guests actually turned to stare. Park Ji-yoon, Jae-wook repeated thoughtfully, extending his hand with genuine warmth. The security systems architect. I've heard excellent things about your work from our IT department. They speak very highly of your innovative approaches to threat assessment. I shook his hand, acutely aware that every person in our vicinity was now listening intently to what would happen next. Thank you, Mr. Kim. Your education initiative sounds fascinating. The integration of practical skills training with traditional curriculum could be genuinely revolutionary if implemented correctly. His eyes lit up with the kind of genuine interest that money can't buy. You understand the vision. Most people focus exclusively on the charity aspect and miss the systemic implications of what we're trying to accomplish. Exactly, I said, warming to the topic. Surface-level solutions just perpetuate existing problems. Real systemic change requires structural thinking and long-term commitment to addressing root causes rather than symptoms. Yuna cleared her throat loudly, a sound that managed to convey both impatience and outrage. How academic. Mr. Kim, I was hoping we could discuss something more practical and immediately relevant to your business interests. Actually, Jae-wook said, still looking at me with focused attention, I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts on our cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We've had some concerns about potential weaknesses in our financial data systems, and I'd value an expert perspective. And just like that, I found myself in a detailed technical conversation with one of Korea's most powerful CEOs, while Yuna stood frozen beside us, her perfect facade cracking like ice under pressure. This was about to get much, much worse for her. Our conversation about cybersecurity architecture continued for nearly 20 minutes, during which Jae-wook demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of both technical systems and business implications that genuinely impressed me. He asked intelligent questions, made insightful connections, and clearly grasped the strategic importance of proactive security measures. Meanwhile, stood increasingly agitated beside us, her perfectly maintained composure eroding with each passing minute that Jae-wook's attention remained focused on me rather than her. Her friends had drifted away, following more promising social opportunities, leaving her stranded in our increasingly technical discussion. The key is anticipating attack vectors before they're exploited, I was explaining, gesturing to illustrate my point. Most companies focus on reactive measures, but by then the damage is already done. Prevention requires thinking like an attacker and identifying vulnerabilities before they do. Fascinating, Jae-wook replied with genuine interest. How do you stay ahead of threats that are constantly evolving? Continuous learning and adaptation. The moment you think you've solved the problem permanently, you've already lost. Security is a dynamic process, not a static solution. Mr. Kim, Yuna finally interrupted, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Surely you don't want to spend the entire evening discussing work? There are so many other interesting topics we could explore. Art, culture, travel, things that matter to people of refinement. Actually, this is quite fascinating, Jae-wook replied without looking at her, his attention still focused on me. Please continue, Mississippi Park. You were saying about threat modeling? The dismissal was so complete, so absolute, that I actually felt a moment of sympathy for Yuna. Her entire worldview was built on the assumption that her background, her connections, and her appearance would always trump actual competence and intelligence. Watching that assumption crumble in real time was almost painful to witness. But my sympathy evaporated when I saw the expression that crossed her face. The mask of elegant composure finally slipped completely, revealing something ugly underneath, a toxic combination of entitlement, rage, and vindictive cruelty that had probably been festering beneath the surface her entire life. Really, she said, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby guests. You're choosing some nobody programmer over. I wouldn't call South Korea's leading cybersecurity expert a nobody, Jae-wook said coolly, finally turning to look at her directly. There was no warmth in his expression now, just professional courtesy stretched to its breaking point. That's when Yuna's carefully constructed world finally exploded. Rage flashed across her face like lightning, raw and undisguised. In that moment of complete emotional breakdown, she lost control entirely. Her eyes fixed on my phone, which I'd been holding while showing Jae-wook some security framework diagrams on my screen. Maybe if Little Miss Programmer didn't have her precious security blanket, she snarled, lunging forward and grabbing my phone from my hands. Time seemed to slow as I watched her raise it above her head like a weapon, her face twisted with pure malice. She'd realize how completely insignificant she really is. She hurled my phone with vicious force against the marble floor. The sound of impact echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot, crystal screen exploding into thousands of glittering fragments that scattered across the pristine floor like stars. The entire ballroom fell silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every glass paused halfway to lips. Every eye turned to stare at our small group, where Yuna stood panting with exertion and triumph, surrounded by the wreckage of my destroyed phone. I looked down at the shattered device, then back up at Yuna's victorious sneer. The silence stretched between us, thick with tension and the weight of 100 watching eyes. Feel better? I asked calmly, my voice carrying clearly in the absolute quiet. Much, she breathed, her chest heaving with satisfaction. That's when Kim Jae-wook stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet but carrying across the silent ballroom like a blade. Miss Lee, what exactly do you think you just did? The color began to drain from Yuna's face as she registered the tone of Jae-wook's voice. The triumphant satisfaction in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by the first stirrings of uncertainty. It was just a phone, she stammered, her voice losing its earlier confidence. She can buy another one. It's not like it's anything important, that phone, Jae-wook said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed, contained classified security protocols for half of Seoul's banking system. Protocols that Mississippi Park developed exclusively for Kim Group and our partner institutions. The uncertainty in Yuna's eyes transformed into dawning horror as the implications of his words sank in. I didn't know, she began desperately. You destroyed proprietary technology worth approximately 50 million won, Jae-wook continued relentlessly, containing trade secrets and security frameworks that took years to develop, because of what? Jealousy? Wounded pride? A temper tantrum worthy of a spoiled child. His contempt was palpable, radiating outward like heat from a forge. The gathered crowd pressed closer, smartphones appearing as guests began documenting what was clearly about to become legendary Seoul social media content. Yuna's face had gone completely white beneath her carefully applied makeup. You can't be serious, I am deadly serious, Jae-wook said, reaching into his jacket with deliberate precision. More serious than I've been about anything in quite some time. He pulled out his own phone, the latest model, pristine and expensive, and extended it toward me with the kind of ceremonial gravity usually reserved for formal presentations. Mississippi Park, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom, please use mine. Consider it yours now. Our technical team will recover every file from your damaged device and bill the responsible party for all damages, replacement costs, and any security vulnerabilities created by this act of corporate sabotage. I accepted his phone with steady hands, making sure my voice carried clearly as I replied, Thank you, Mr. Kim. I appreciate your understanding of the situation. Yuna stumbled backward as if she'd been physically struck. You can't possibly be serious about security, Jae-wook called without raising his voice, but with the kind of authority that made uniformed guards materialize instantly from the crowd. Please escort Miss Lee from the premises. She is no longer welcome at Kim Group events, and I want her name added to our security database immediately. The crowd began whispering furiously, phones capturing every moment as Yuna's social execution played out in real time. Her friends, who had abandoned her during the technical conversation, were now backing away as if her disgrace might be contagious. But Jae-wook wasn't finished. Let me be absolutely clear to everyone here, he said, his voice projecting across the ballroom with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his own authority. Anyone who disrespects the professionals who protect our businesses, who enable our success, who contribute real value to our society, anyone who treats such people with contempt, disrespects me personally. The message was unmistakable, and I watched as various guests who had been smirking at the entertainment began to look uncomfortable, wondering if their own behavior might be under scrutiny. Mississippi Park, Jae-wook continued, turning back to me with a smile that was genuine warmth after the ice he'd shown Yuna. I'd like to formally offer you a position as Kim Group's Chief Security Officer. The compensation package includes a signing bonus to cover today's damages, a company vehicle, a furnished apartment in Gangnam, and complete authority over all cybersecurity protocols across our entire corporate structure. The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't just a job offer, this was a public declaration of support that would transform my career overnight. I smiled, holding up his phone which was already buzzing with notifications. I accept, Mr. Kim. When would you like me to start? How about Monday? We can discuss the details over dinner tomorrow evening, if you're available. As security guards flanked, preparing to escort her from the ballroom, I caught her eye one last time. Tears of rage and humiliation had smudged her perfect makeup, and her designer gown now looked like an expensive costume on someone playing a role they'd never earned. You were right about one thing, I called out sweetly, making sure my voice carried clearly across the fascinated crowd. Intelligence really doesn't matter in this world. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough for maximum impact. It's everything. The crowd erupted in applause as security escorted a sobbing Yuna toward the exit, her social death complete and witnessed by everyone who mattered in Seoul's business community. Jae-wook and I continued our conversation as if nothing had happened, my new phone already buzzing with congratulatory messages from contacts who had watched the entire drama unfold. Some lessons are expensive. Others are priceless. Yuna's education in the real world had cost her everything, her reputation, her social standing, and any chance of being taken seriously in these circles ever again. Mine had just made me the most powerful cybersecurity executive in Seoul. As I scrolled through job offers and partnership requests flooding my new phone, I reflected on the evening's events. Power, I had learned, isn't about who your father is or how much your dress costs. It's about what you can do, what you know, and how much other people need you to succeed. Everything else is just expensive decoration.